NBA head coaches are almost like college football coaches now, where like in college football, like Ed Ogeron won a national championship, and then 2 years later he was fired. Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm Nick DiMartino. That's Liam Barwick. This is another episode of Moving the Goalpost. You can follow us across social media at MTGPETB. You can follow the Empty the Bench Network across social media at ETB Network. You can follow me on Twitter at Nick DMart. You can follow Liam at Liam MTGP. Is that right? Okay, I got it right. You can watch all Empty the Bench shows on YouTube.com/ETB Network. You can listen to all Empty the Bench shows on etbpodcast.com, and you can listen to Moving the Goalpost wherever you get your podcasts, and make sure to like and subscribe. And this show, Moving the Goalpost, is presented by Playback. Stay tuned for later in the show to find out more. All right. So, how you doing today?
I'm good. I'm sad that the March Madness is over, but
yeah, it is sad. It is sad that March Madness is over. Yeah, I think that that's actually kind of like people always talk about like how sad it is when like football season ends and things like that. But I think March Madness has got to be up there too. Like when the college basketball season ends. Same thing when college football ends. I will say though, when baseball ends, I'm like, I don't really care all that much. When the NBA ends, I'm like, whatever. Because the seasons are just so long. And, they're going to be back soon anyway. But we did get a great Final Four. So, I mean, even though it is sad that March Madness is over, we got one of the best Final Four. I mean, we had the best last three. It was some of the best last three games we could have asked for.
Mm-hmm.
So, for all the complaining this year about, the lack of Cinderella teams, okay, well, we at least went out with a bang, is how I would put it. We went out with games that, I'm not saying sports are scripted, but if they were scripted, they would go out. That's how the script writers would do it.
Yeah.
That would kind of be the way. So Houston came back to beat Duke. Duke were heavy favorites to win the whole thing. I looked at some of the odds before the Final Four, and they were actually like minus 110. That's how big of heavy favorites they were. Mm-hmm. And I was kind of convinced of it too a little bit, even though I had Houston winning the whole thing in my bracket. By the way, I haven't won that I haven't picked the correct winner in 12 years. And that win got vacated. So I don't even know if it counts. But this was a great game. I mean, this was a great game. Duke totally like collapsed in a way that I didn't think they were capable of, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
They completely blew that game. The last 10 and a half minutes, they went completely, they scored, they had one field goal in the last 10 and a half minutes of that game, which I didn't think Duke was capable of that type of collapse. And it wasn't, I mean, everybody's like talking about Duke collapsing, but also just Houston deserves a lot of credit too. That doesn't happen without Houston's tremendous defense.
I mean, yeah, but I do think that Duke lost the game more than Houston won it. But yeah, I mean, it doesn't happen. I mean, yeah, it was shocking, definitely. And it was, it was shocking. And I think it's a bigger loss if you're a college fan, when your college team loses, because like if you're, I mean, it would never be fine, but like if your professional team loses like that, at least you've got that team coming back next year. If you're a college fan, that's really the last time you're going to see that team.
Yeah.
I mean, Duke will definitely, obviously, be good next year, but it's even more heartbreaking. But yeah, it was bad. I mean, it was bad all around, and it was bad coaching. It was bad shooting, bad free throw shooting, and bad inbounding. It was bad everything. And, I do think that the fact that Duke never played a close game all season was a detriment to them. And it's that is something that is, very That is very overlooked. Houston was in a lot of close games, especially in this tournament. They were in, well, their last three game or their three of their last four were very close, and Duke was in none all season really. And I think that showed up, and sometimes that you need that.
Yeah, because it teaches teams how to actually play. It teaches teams how to win. I mean, like people, I mean, a good example like this year would be like the Kansas City Chiefs. Even though it was against a lot of bad teams and was a bad sign as to how good they were, at least it did teach them how to play in close games. And Duke seems to fit that description. By the way, is Duke almost becoming like the Yankees of college basketball? Because they are consistently like one of the favorites, one of the best teams, but they still haven't won it in 10 years. I mean, the Yankees, it's going on 16 years coming up this year. But I mean, Duke is almost like becoming, are they like not becoming the Yankees of college basketball? Like the ultimate like traditional favorite, huge brand, very hated, but still hasn't won in 10 years. And people just don't even seem to realize it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's crazy. But I do think I mean, this is just so novelty, but I do think that's a game that Coach K wins.
I agree. I don't think there's any way they collapse that way if Coach K is still the head coach.
Yeah.
Yeah. And by the way, I don't think Duke will ever be the dynasty that it was with Coach K. And I'm not saying John Shire's a bad coach or anything. I think he did a good job filling Coach K's shoes, but I just don't think Duke will ever be the same level of dominant that they were under Coach K. I think that it really for any program to be dominant, I think it's more than just the logo. I think that they have to have like a world-class head coach to remain that dominant. Like
they'll still be a top like 10 team every year, probably.
Yes. I'm not saying they won't be, but I don't think they'll win to the degree that they did with Coach K. And NIL has something to do with it too, on some level too. I think that also makes it a little harder for them, for any particular team to be as dominant.
Right.
I also want to talk about Florida. They survived Auburn in the Final Four. This was a very Florida game, I would say, like just from the way that Florida, I mean, you want to talk about playing close games. I mean, Florida, in a sense, is like the opposite of Duke in that sense, where they've played a lot of close games and were able to pull it off.
Yeah, I mean, this more felt like Auburn kind of just ran out of gas at the end. The game before it, I would say, was Texas Tech threw the game away against Florida. They made every single mistake they could have made. So the game before that was more of and Florida also realistically could have lost to UConn too in the second round. That was a really close game. And they made some big plays. But yeah, I mean, this more just felt to me like Auburn kind of ran out of gas at the end of the game here, and Florida was more primed to win, and Florida were the better team. But yeah, to me, this just felt like Auburn kind of ran out of gas at the end.
Yeah, I think they did too. I mean, you to a degree, though, you can say the same thing about Duke, that Duke just ran out of gas.
Yeah, but Duke was more like made a ton of mistakes where Auburn just felt like they couldn't get it done. But yeah, and Auburn also never had a 7. Duke had a 6-point lead with 30 seconds left.
Yeah, and also, but I mean, like Houston was slowly coming back in the second half of that game.
Right.
And throughout, and by the way, in that game, in the Duke Houston game, like it felt so, that game at one point felt so out of reach for Houston. I remember thinking to myself, you know, at one point I was, when Duke was up 6 points with 30 seconds left, I was thinking, oh my God, is Houston really going to cover? Because Houston has no business covering this game. And then they ended up winning the whole thing outright.
Right.
Like that's how out of reach the game felt with such little time left for Houston. In terms of this game, it was a little less surprising because it was a very Florida game. Like Florida is a very good second half team, and not a little bit like St. John's in a sense, a very good second half team and not really the best first half team. It was one of those games. I mean, of course, Florida was losing in the first half, and then they were able to pull it off in the second half. And you know what? I think that when Florida is like a very streaky team, and they're streaky in all of the games that they play. They have good moments and bad moments. They're never consistently good for all 40 minutes. And the thing is, when Florida is hot, when they're on, I think that they're unbeatable. Like, I don't think any other team in the country is better than them when they're really on fire like that. When they're hitting shots. I mean, when Walter Clayton, like Walter Clayton stole the show in a lot of these games, and he didn't even play well for the entirety of a lot of these games. I mean, if you look at the game against Maryland, for instance, I mean, Florida, I mean, the margin was pretty big, but I mean, for like the first half of that game, Walter Clayton was a total no-show. And then the second half, they finally pulled away. I mean, Walter Clayton Jr. is one of the best, not just three-point shooters I've seen in college, but also just one of the best shot creators. Not only a great shot creator, but like a really good bad shot hitter. Like, he hits a lot of like what normally you would think of as bad shots. Like they used to say about Yogi Berra, he's a good bad pitch hitter. I think it's the same thing with Walter Clayton. Like, he's just a really good bad shot maker.
Yeah. Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah.
I look at some of these shots and you're just like, oh my God, what is he doing? But I mean, like, he's one of the few guys where like Florida is just Florida won games because Walter Clayton took and made a whole bunch of bad shots.
Yeah, exactly.
And very few players can ever really, especially in college, really fit that description at all. Very few.
Yeah.
Very few.
Yeah, no, definitely. No, definitely. He was definitely the MVP of the tournament.
And I mean, you look at a team like St. John's and they just have like a whole bunch of, you look at a team like St. John's and they just have a whole bunch of guys who can't even hit like good shots, can't even hit like good 2-point shot, like good mid-range shots. Then you have this guy and then you have Florida, and he's able to hit a whole bunch of just great shots. I mean, terrible 3-point shots. I mean, which I guess in some ways makes them great. But I do want to recap the Florida game, Florida Houston game. The interesting thing about this game is that Houston lost this game in the same way that they won the game against Duke. In a weird way.
What do you mean?
Like they were ahead most of this game and they kind of blew it at the end. I guess not to the same degree that Duke lost it, but I would say in a very similar way, which I guess happened a lot in this tournament. Texas Tech kind of did that. Like Texas Tech lost to Florida in a similar way, in a similar fashion to the way they beat Arkansas, just with the other team's mistakes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it was bad. I didn't like Houston doesn't have any scorers, so I don't know why they kind of ran the two shots toward the end, especially on the last play. Like, I really thought they should have went inside. They should have went to the rack, tried to get to the hoop. Their strength is rebounding. They were getting a ton of offensive rebounds the entire night. So I didn't like. I thought those were ill-advised plays. The last two where they didn't even get shots up in the end, but the last two plays were certainly ill-advised. But Houston was always going to, like we said, Duke blew the game, but it was, and I think that was just more of a historic choke job. Like, Houston is never going to be engineered to come from behind, which is dumb to say because they did have a big comeback, but again, that was more of a choke job. They're a defensive and rebounding team, and they're not a scoring team.
Yeah, they're not a team like Florida that can easily come from behind. Like, the truth is, having a lead against Houston is probably a fair bit safer than having a lead against Florida. Like, if you're up at halftime against Florida, like, there's really just no guarantees. It's like if you're winning at halftime against the Warriors, you're just like,
yeah. Well, and there's so many, like, I mean, early in the game too, in the first half, the first half was so sloppy, it was crazy. But Houston had so many second, third, and fourth chances to score on different plays that they didn't score on.
Yeah.
And, again, you lose the game by 2. But, yeah, so Houston was, I thought, a very similar team to St. John's almost in that they didn't have scores. They had great defense, and they rebounded the ball. And that's what got them there. So, yeah, when you're down by 2 and you've got the last shot, they weren't, a team that was built for those moments.
I could also understand, like, I also understand how tempting it may have been for Kelvin Sampson to go for the win with the 3-point shot. I agree with you, though. It's ill-advised because they would have had a much better shot at winning that game if they had just gone to overtime than hitting a 3-point shot, which not only do they not have a guy, I mean, they do have some guys who can hit threes, but like they don't have a Walter Clayton who hits like I said before, bad shots or is an amazing shot creator. But even if you did have a guy like that, that's what Florida's defense was prepared for. They were prepared for them going for a game-winning three. And they were much more, their defense was much more prepared for that. And at the very end, they couldn't even get the shot off. And I forget who it was. He basically double dribbled, or didn't double dribble, like almost for an up and down, and because they just couldn't get a shot off. It would have been much smarter if they had just played played more to their strength and just gone to overtime, because they would have had a pretty good chance of winning that game if they had gone to overtime, a much higher percentage chance than if they had been trying to win the game in regulation.
Yeah, I agree.
And by the way, Walter Clayton Jr., who is the star of the team this year, didn't even play that good of a game, and they were able to end up winning.
No, yeah, exactly.
He went 1 for 7 from 3 and put up 11 points.
Yeah.
Elijah Martin didn't play a great game either. I mean, Elijah Martin put up 7 points the whole game. I mean, combined.
No one's going to score much against Houston, though, anyway, but yeah.
No, but they weren't even able to hit threes.
Right.
Like their accuracy wasn't great. Their field, I mean, no, I get it. I mean, they both took a bunch of shots, but they kept missing.
Right.
So, I mean, yeah, obviously Houston's defense is very good, but neither of them really showed up. It was more Will Richard. It was more Will Richard and Alex Condon that showed up in that game than Walter Clayton Jr. I mean, he was able to be good in certain moments, but I mean, they didn't win that game because of him, really.
Yeah.
And by the way, Walter Clayton Jr., he was an Iona guy. He played at Iona under Rick Pitino. He could have ended up following Rick Pitino to St. John's. I mean, I think part of the reason was NIL, which I had a lot to do with it.
I don't think, and Pitino wasn't a huge fan of him either. I don't know,
He was a fan of Walter Clayton Jr.
Yeah, he had said a comment basically that he was slow and he could all he could do was pass, pretty much.
It certainly wasn't the case this year. Rick Pitino, by the way, was named Coach of the Year. I know AP gave Rick Pitino and Bruce Pearl co-Coach of the Year awards, but I think this is honestly, I think this is well deserved. He's almost like the Carlos Mendoza of college basketball this year.
I don't. He's. I mean, well, yeah. Obviously, he took them to heights that they hadn't seen in 50 years.
25 years.
Well, but they hadn't won the Big East in 50, right?
So 25.
So they were. They were great, but I never had thought they were. I had said on our show when we did the pre-tournament show that I thought they were going to go out in the second round. They did, but even so, it was unbelievable accomplishment for Pitino the whole year. I mean, just to get St. John's from where they were, and last year obviously had them almost there. So he's had a really good start to his tenure there, which won't be very long because he's kind of older, but he's certainly had a good start.
I mean, he's 70 years old. He's not that old. He could end up being there for a decade for all we know. We see a lot of old college coaches.
Yeah.
Yes, I mean, actually, if anything, I would argue he might not stay there long because he might leave for a better job.
I don't know about that, but yeah, it's possible.
Moving the Goalposts is presented by Playback. Watching sports is more fun with others, but we spend too much time watching alone. Playback is a virtual space where communities can stream live sports together with everyone perfectly synced up. Creators can hop on stage, deliver their own play-by-play analysis and commentary, and invite viewers up for Q&A. Playback makes watching sports fully interactive and a social experience. From playing fantasy sports, rubbing your favorite players and teams, and watching with the commentators and communities you care about. Win or lose, sports are best enjoyed together. Join our community by going to playback.tv/ETB network to find out more, including our live stream schedule. And now back to the show. The Nuggets fire Mike Malone and Calvin Booth. Calvin Booth is the Nuggets GM. This is a weird year in the NBA. It's like the year of impulsive firings in the middle of the season with teams that are contenders that don't make a lot of sense. This is like the third time this has happened this year. Now it's no secret that the Nuggets have been in a slump for they won 3 of their last 10 games. Denver, and so they certainly have been in a slump, and a few of those games and some of the games that they've lost have been against bad teams. However, they're still a playoff team, and I do find it a little hard to believe that firing your head coach and GM, especially the head coach, right before the playoffs is nothing less than like an ill-advised move. Like, it'd be one thing if this happened in January, but this is happening a week before the playoffs. It almost seems a little bit like there was some type of front office power struggle. I mean, like, I thought the Jets firing Saleh was a very ill-advised and impulsive decision, but that was at least in October when it happened, as opposed to and the Jets really weren't very good, as opposed to if the Jets were a week out from being in the playoffs, basically a guaranteed spot, I think that would be a little bit different. But I don't know what it is this year with all of these NBA teams making such odd decisions that seem like almost fishy in a way. It's like, why would it just leads everybody to believe that there was some type of thing that went down behind the scenes.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously winning a championship in the NBA doesn't really give you much time, because Mike Budenholzer was fired 2 years after he won a championship, and now Mike Malone's been fired 2 years after he won a championship. Which I think, honestly, I think you should get like a 5-year cushion after winning a championship. I mean, really, especially if they've been good. But I mean, it really just, the NBA is just, a players' league. I mean, I don't think that there's any chance. Obviously, we don't know anything for a fact, but there's no chance that this move is made without consultation of Jokic. I think that maybe something was happening there or something like that, because when you have probably, I don't know if would you say the best player in the NBA?
Yeah, I would say so.
So when you have the best player in the NBA, I mean, and you're, and that's your team, it's always going to go through him. Just like, obviously, I think what happened in Memphis probably went through Ja Morant, or was maybe initiated by Ja Morant. And I think that it's just a players' league now. And this is, I think that most firings in the NBA are more player driven than in any other league.
Yes, that's definitely true. Although I think a lot of it is player driven. However, yes, I think a lot of it is player driven. I think that the Bucks firing Adrian Griffin was player driven, and they were actually winning games. And they were worse under Doc Rivers than they were under Adrian Griffin. The team even showed a video of the players dancing around after Adrian Griffin was fired.
Yeah.
This is. But were there any? I mean, I don't know. I guess because Jokic would if it were true, Jokic would never actually let anybody know that was the reason. He seems to be very private and doesn't show emotion. So I guess on some level,
do you think there's any chance that this happened without consulting him, without speaking?
No. However, I don't necessarily just because there's no way that this would have happened without Jokic's approval doesn't mean that he was the one pushing for the firing either.
Yeah.
Like, they could have just said, okay, they may have consulted him about firing him, and he was just like, all right. And then, and that doesn't necessarily mean he called the front office and said, I want Mike Malone fired.
Yeah. And so as of taping of this show, which is on, so there's one, two, three, 4, 5, 6. There's 6 teams, 3 through 8. Yeah, 3 through 8 that are within 2 games in the Western Conference of each other. And the reason that's significant is the Clippers, Warriors, Timberwolves, and Memphis all are 46 and 32. Two of those teams will have to play in the play-in. Another team, Denver, is half a game above those teams, so they are only half a game above the play-in. And the Lakers are 2 games above those teams, so they're only 2 games above the play-in. So the difference between home court advantage in a series and playing in the play-in is extremely small right now in the Western Conference.
Yeah.
Which it just adds. And I know the Nuggets are slumping, but I mean, they're 46 and 32. They won the championship 2 years ago. They got to the conference semifinals a year ago. Like they're right now, they would be a four seed. I mean, it doesn't make sense from a basketball perspective. It makes zero sense.
Yeah.
From an outside perspective or an off the court perspective, it might make more sense.
Yeah, it might make more sense I mean, by the way, like, I feel like NBA coaches used to not get fired so easily. It used to not happen so easily. Like, it's almost like becoming an NBA head coach. NBA head coaches are almost like college football coaches now, where like in college football, like Ed Ogeron won a national championship, and then 2 years later he was fired. I mean, like, as if it didn't just happen.
Yeah.
That seems to be a thing with NBA head coaches too, where like you can win a championship and then 2 years later just be gone. Or
Right.
like you could, it's not even like I understand firing head coaches in the middle of the season when the team is just bad, but like the same thing with Memphis, them firing Taylor Jenkins in the middle. I mean, Memphis is not as good as Denver, but they're at least a playing team, and they
Right.
would be a playoff team if they played in the East.
Yeah, and I don't know how many times I could go over that. You can go chapter and verse with how much. Let's start with the Nets, right? The Nets pushed out Kenny Atkinson for Steve Nash, and that didn't work. Atkinson's now coaching the best team in the league, or the second best team in the league, record-wise at least. You look at, obviously, with the Bucks, like you talked about, they pushed out Budenholzer and Adrian Griffin. Neither of that has worked. If you want to cross sports, which you talked about the Jets, I mean, the Jets, or we could even go to Phoenix in the same realm, which is same league, which is another player-driven team that's a complete failure. And then you were talking about the Jets. The Jets, the last 2 years, have essentially become a singular player-run team, and that's been a failure. So I don't, know why these situations continue to happen. I mean, you like, I think that it's almost like, and obviously I'm not pro like the owners controlling everything or the coach and the players having no freedom, but this is it doesn't work when you let players run the team. There's no historical place where it's worked.
It's basically letting the inmates run the asylum.
Right.
I mean, well, it's not that I don't understand why. I do fully understand why. And there's a reason why it happens in basketball. There's a reason why it happens in the NBA more than any other sport, which is that individual players in the NBA make a far bigger difference than they do in any other sport. And also, it's just like the players are friendly with each other a lot more than they used to, and they often want to team up and join and form super teams. So any little thing that pisses off, and not to mention the fact that NBA players are now like celebrities, so and are used to getting their way, and then that breeds a culture of like teams just basically bending the knee to whatever the players' demands are, and the players essentially becoming GMs. But like, you hire GMs for a reason. There's a reason that basketball players are players and GMs are GMs.
Right.
And the truth is, sometimes the coaches that players want to play for, the reason it's almost like having a manager that all of the workers love the most.
Right.
Like, sometimes the reason for that is because they kind of let them slack off and do things, or just allow things to happen that make them that make you less successful. Whereas the coaches that are not as much fun the reason they're not fun is because they're disciplined and they breed a culture of success. I mean, is Bill Belichick fun to play for? No, but he's going to win Super Bowls.
Right. Yeah, and that is sort of that mentality of the players is sort of starting to creep its way into the NFL too.
Yeah, although I don't think that
among wide receivers.
Yeah, that's true. The difference, it's true, and it's funny you bring that up because I think that wide receivers often think they're more important than they really are, because it's just a basic fact that a guy like Jokic or even John Morant on Memphis is going to be like way more important to that franchise than any one wide receiver is to any franchise. Because you can be a great team, and if you lose your best wide receiver, you're still going to be great. Like the Chiefs with Tyreek Hill, they won 2 Super Bowls since they lost Tyreek, since they traded Tyreek Hill. Yeah. And you look at some really bad teams, and some of them might have really great wide receivers or really great running backs. And that happens all the time. Whereas in basketball, that's not going to be the case. Like, you're not going to have a guy like Jokic on a bad team, on an otherwise bad team, and the team is going to be bad. I mean, they won't win a championship, but like they're not going to be the worst in the league. So I don't think wide receivers are nearly important enough to be joining this whole thing.
Correct. Of course, yeah.
And I also don't think it will ever reach the level in the NFL that it does in the NBA. I don't think there's
correct.
But I mean, as far as like, you're right though. As far as like this never working, you're right. It never does work. It never really does work. I mean, obviously, I understand why it ends up happening because you just can't lose your star players. And I guess there are times when like it's somewhat appropriate to want to try and keep your star players happy. I mean, that's partly why they pay them a lot of money, essentially to keep them happy. But now it's a whole bunch of like circumstances and doing things they like to keep them happy. Like, for instance, I think that there are times when it can be okay as long as it's not detrimental to the team. Like, for instance, the Lakers hiring JJ Redick was the Lakers basically trying to keep LeBron happy by hiring.
Well, but to be fair, the Lakers did not want to hire JJ Redick first. He was not their first option.
No, their first option was Danny Hurley, and Danny Hurley turned it down.
Well, to be fair, that was and also to be fair, JJ Redick they have been successful this year.
I was going to say,
they added Luka Doncic, but still.
But they were also successful before they had Luka Doncic. They were still
they were having a good season,
and he's undoubtedly a better head coach than Darvin Ham was. And JJ Redick, I mean, the only thing I would say is that JJ Redick, I think, is a better broadcaster than he is a head coach. And that says a lot. And I mean, he's like a good broadcaster, not that he's a bad head coach. But I'll say, and they did that to appease LeBron. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, and I don't think it was a bad decision because it turns out that was actually a pretty good hire. And even though it was and keeping LeBron happy, I would say is a plus. But it's not like LeBron put out a list of demands and said, I want you to just sign all of my friends. And then they just listened to it. It was just more like, all right, we're going to hire the head coach that LeBron kind of wants because they didn't get the guy who they wanted initially, Danny Hurley. And even though people are freaking out about JJ Redick's quote unquote qualifications about being the head coach of the Lakers, they were all wrong. And he's been a good head coach. But that's a very minor thing. And it's also for LeBron. There's a little bit of a difference between like appeasing LeBron and appeasing like John Morant or something like that.
Yeah, agreed.
And as far as the Jets doing it, I mean, that was the dumbest of all because like Aaron Rodgers was like 40 years old. And it ended up getting, he probably ended up getting Saleh fired, and Joe Douglas ended up getting fired because and in fairness to Joe Douglas, I'm not saying he was he was a great GM, but it's just like it's not totally fair when Joe Douglas gets fired when it was Aaron Rodgers effectively making the decisions, and that was Woody Johnson's choice.
Yeah.
It was.
So Joe Douglas had a good draft, and then nothing really past that.
Yeah. And I'm not saying, like I said, he wasn't a great GM. I'm just saying he was last season he was kind of.
Saleh wasn't a great coach, but he was better than what they finished with.
Yeah. And I remember Colin Cowherd said congratulations, New York Jets, you just fired the most competent guy on your staff. And he was right.
Right.
He was right. He really was the most competent guy on the staff. And when your alternative is Jeff Ulbrich, it's like, yeah, it was a stupid move. And the Jets, they lost a whole lot of close games that year.
Right.
So who knows what could have happened. I do want to talk about, now you're a Giant fan. Speaking of the NFL, you're a Giant fan. What should the Giants do in the offseason? That seems to be the talk of the town. In terms of drafting a quarterback now that they have Russell Wilson. Yeah. I know that you like the Russell Wilson deal. I like the Russell Wilson deal too. I think it's a smart move.
I mean, I would have rathered Aaron Rodgers, but
fair enough.
I'm just also an Aaron Rodgers fan, but I would have rathered Rodgers, but yes, I like the deal and I like the signing of Jameis. And now where I think we disagree is I think they have to take either Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter, whoever is going to be available. They cannot take. I like Shedeur Sanders a lot, and I wouldn't mind him on the Giants, but I don't think that when you sign 3 quarterbacks in the offseason, Russell Wilson, Jameis Winston, and then they extended Tommy DeVito, that you can add another quarterback to your roster, essentially wasting a draft pick in an odd situation, and now you've got 4 quarterbacks on the roster. That to me seems odd. What I think they need to do is draft Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter. I would take either one, but I think that Travis Hunter is going to go to Cleveland. So let's say they draft Abdul Carter. You play Russell Wilson this season. You do what win 5 games or whatever the hell they're going to do. Get rid of the coaching staff. Get rid of the GM. Jameis Winston starts next year, and Arch Manning or Drew Aller, whoever they're going to take, is going to sit behind Jameis for a year, and that's what you have to do.
I think that sounds a little bit too idealistic. I don't think there's anything wrong with. I mean, I guess you could argue maybe they shouldn't. Okay, let me ask you a question. What if they hadn't re-signed Tommy DeVito? And
they still would have had 2 quarterbacks that they spent money on that are veteran quarterbacks. That why are you going to waste? Listen, they wouldn't have. I think they're not going to take Shedeur Sanders because it timed up too quickly with, as soon as the Titans became obvious the Titans are going to take Cam Ward, the Giants signed Russell Wilson, which to me is just saying we wanted Cam Ward, and now that we know we're probably not going to get him, we're going to go to our plan B. So I don't think that if their plan B was Shedeur Sanders, they wouldn't have signed Russell Wilson.
I don't think it means that necessarily that they absolutely don't want Shedeur Sanders, though. I think it just means that they don't totally 100% believe in him for next season. That's really what it means.
And the other problem they have is that John Mara said that the Giants need to play meaningful games in December. And what that means is that if you're Daboll and Shane, you have the pressure, all the pressure is on this year. So it doesn't matter to Joe Shane or Brian Daboll what the Giants' future is if they don't go to the playoffs this year, which they won't, by the way. But let's just say for their sake, if they don't go to the playoffs this year, they will be gone. So it doesn't matter to them what their future is, and they kind of have to win now. The Giants are nowhere near a win now team, but they have to be successful this season. They have to be successful, those two.
Do you really think if the Giants don't make the playoffs, they're necessarily going to get fired?
Yes.
I would say no. Because if they didn't get fired after last year and they're way more successful this year.
Okay. Well, okay, they're not going to be much more successful, but it depends. Now, but they have the pressure on them to win. But to be more successful, they're going to have to win 6 more games than they did last year, 5 or 6 more games. So what you consider more successful, what I would consider more successful.
If they win 5 or 6 more games next year after last year, I find it very hard to believe they're going to get fired because the Giants.
Just saying, that's what they have to do.
But I think they can end up winning 5 or 6 more games. How many games did they win? Actually, no, probably not that many.
Okay, hold on. But hold on. I'm gonna. Yeah, they won 3, did they not?
Yeah, they won 3. Okay.
They won 3, but I'll give you the what are we 2020? But yeah, but I have to tell you though. I mean, now again, like this is not going to. This is not going to. You know, each season is different. Like, for instance, we thought the 49ers were a good team that year or whatever, but let's just these are the opponents that they have this year. At Chicago, these are the road games they have to play. At Chicago, at Dallas, at Denver, at Detroit, at Vegas, at New England, at New Orleans. Home games, Dallas, Philly, Washington, Green Bay, Minnesota, Kansas City, Chiefs, Kansas City, Chargers, 49ers, and then also at Philly, at Washington.
They might not win a road game.
They might not win a home game. Dallas, Philly, Washington, Green Bay, Minnesota, Kansas City, Chargers, and 49ers. I can't find a home win there.
Yeah.
And the 2 games that I could say, okay, there's 3 games that I could say maybe the Giants could win, but I still don't think that that's possible. That it's like a given. They're 4. At New Orleans, at New England, at Vegas, and possibly at Chicago. And maybe you throw at Denver in there, but I don't think so. But again, so they're going to be a bad season. Now, there was an idea. Now, this was, which I think he might have been saying it haphazardly joking, but I actually don't think it's an awful idea, which was brought up by PFT commenter on the Part of My Take podcast, was that what the Giants could do, since they're going to get fired anyway, probably, is they run. So, like, let's say Russell Wilson starts the game, right? And the first series they punt, then they put Jameis Winston in. And if they punt, then they go to DeVito. And if they punt, then they go back to Wilson. And the guy scores, then they keep that quarterback in. I actually don't think that's a terrible idea.
Yeah, I mean, we've never seen it before, but it actually is not as bad of an idea as you might think.
But considering that they're probably going to get fired anyway, and they're not a good team at all. There's a lot of holes in the roster. Now, I will say, like, if they've made moves also to where, like, they've made some decent moves this offseason to where, like, I think that they are going. I think that you would agree. I mean, it's tough to be worse, but if you look at them, they're probably going to be a better team than they were last year. Yeah. They have a lot. They made a lot of adjustments. They're going. I mean, when you have Wilson and Jameis Winston and a good quarterback, like a good quarterback with Malik Neighbors could be seriously dangerous. And then I think they've also made enough. But another point about the draft is they've made enough moves defensively to where if they get Abdul Carter in a year or 2, it could be a seriously good defense.
Yes, I think that could be true.
My concern with Abdul Carter's injuries, but past.
I mean, he's one of the best defensive. I mean, the only defensive player I like more than Abdul Carter is Travis Hunter, and that's because he plays like both sides of the ball. That's the only player I would take over Abdul Carter, but Abdul Carter is also great.
Well, I think Abdul Carter I mean, they wore the same number and did say, I think he is a Micah Parsons level too.
Yeah, I think so too. And, but you're right. I think you're right about pretty much everything you said in terms of like the future of the Giants. One thing now, I think that it is not necessarily a given that because the Giants signed Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston, that means they absolutely are not going to draft Shedeur Sanders because Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston are still short-term solutions at quarterback. I mean, Jameis Winston is only signed to a 2-year deal. Russell Wilson to a 1-year deal. What's that?
They're a bridge.
Exactly. They're a bridge. And you can talk about next year's draft, and it may be true that the Giants are going to be not much better than they were last year. Like, if the Giants are not much better than they were last year, this upcoming season, then I agree there's a really good chance Dable and Shane get fired, but you never know with what the matter. I think they should be fired at least, but you never know. I don't know what ownership's going to do. We just don't know. But another thing you have to look at is the fact that there's also a really good chance that they're going to be too good next year to actually get a good quarterback in the draft next year, which is why they might want to end up going with Shedeur Sanders. Now, none of us really know how they feel about Shedeur Sanders. But I mean, it is possible that they're going to, like, here's the thing. If they signed Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston, especially the Russell Wilson signing, they're not going into next year thinking, oh, we're going to get Arch Manning, because Arch Manning is probably likely going to be the number 1 or number 2 pick. So they're probably not going into next year thinking we're going to get Arch Manning. Ultimately, I think them signing Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston was just a way for them to essentially try and save their jobs. Because even if they don't draft Shedeur Sanders, even if they don't draft a quarterback, there's a really good chance that even if they win 7 games this year, I don't think they're getting fired. They can go 7-10, especially playing in like a tough division and knowing the way I mean, that's doubling the Giants' win total from last year. And in that scenario, I feel like there's no way they get fired.
I mean, we'll just have to see. But it also depends how they get 7 wins. If they start 2-10 and win 5 in a row, they'll get fired. If they are, if they're out of it and just winning meaningless games, then they'll get fired. But it depends. But I do not see anywhere near 7 wins on that schedule, though. So I still find it hard. But again, like, for instance, the thing with football is, like, for instance, also, like, the Jaguars were, I think they won 4 games last year or whatever it was, 4-13. But they had 8. They were like 0-8 in 1-score games. So there's so much finite margins between, like, being the worst team and being a playoff team in these 1-score games, where, like, 1 score, like, for instance, if the Jaguars had split those games that go 0-8, they would have been 9-8 or whatever, so yeah, there's sometimes in football, there's so much. I mean, we all thought that San Francisco was the sure bet to go to the Super Bowl, and they didn't even make the playoffs. So you really don't know. But you don't know year to year with football. A lot of stuff changes year to year in football. I mean, the Commanders won. The Giants aren't going to do this, but the Commanders won 3 games last year, the year before last year. So stuff does change year to year in football.
Because they drafted a quarterback,
right? But stuff does change year to year in football. And football is the hardest sport to predict, definitely.
Yeah, that's why it's so great. Well, the reason football is so difficult to predict is because there's the most moving parts, and it's by far the most complicated. Like, a lot of baseball fans talk about how complex baseball is, and they're like, well, you just don't watch baseball because it's too complex. And it's just like, football, all the players have to study a playbook.
All baseball is right now is strikeout, home run.
I mean, baseball is probably the least complex. I mean, there's some complexity to all sports. Like, people say it's a thinking man's sport, but I mean, do baseball players have to study a book?
Yeah, but they don't do anything anymore in baseball. They don't hit and run. They don't steal bases besides Ohtani.
Yeah.
They don't bunt. Like, so they don't really do that stuff.
Yeah. So like, football, the point is that, like, if they were gambling games, like, it's almost like if baseball, I would say football is like, if sports were like gambling games, I would say baseball is like poker, and football is like craps, where it's like fast paced and a whole bunch of different moving parts, which makes it so difficult to predict. And everybody likes to think they can predict football. Right?
I would say baseball is like pie-gow poker. It's like,
okay, that's a better example. Baseball is like pie-gow poker. Yeah, you're right. Football is very hard to predict, but like I said, it is not a given to me that just because they have Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston temporarily, that means they don't. That means that they're going to draft. That they.
I didn't say it's not a given, but I'm just saying that it would likely be a mistake. But I have also not seen anybody say that they're going to draft Shedeur Sanders since they signed Russell Wilson. All of the mock drafts have them taking Carter.
Do you think that? I mean, I'm not going to lie though. It would be such a gift to the New York sports media if Shedeur Sanders ended up going to the Giants.
Well, but Aaron Rodgers was a gift to the New York sports media.
Oh, absolutely, going to the Giants.
But how'd that end up? So
but I know. I'm not saying I'm not saying it's going to end up well. I'm just saying that could very easily happen. By the way, Aaron Rodgers going to the Giants would also be a gift to the New York media. Just because of the talk about Aaron Rodgers and all of that. In Shedeur Sanders' case, it's just going to be, his dad, and that would be a huge part of it.
Yeah.
And that would just be a huge talk of the town. What do you think they're going to talk about on WFAN in August if Shedeur Sanders goes to the Giants? That's what they're going to talk about.
Yeah.
I do briefly want to talk about Pat McAfee. Apparently, he might be in a little bit of trouble with the Mary Kate Cornett case story. There were rumors going around social media that she slept with her boyfriend's dad. She was a freshman at Ole Miss. And Pat McAfee may end up getting sued for this.
Yeah.
To me, I think it's a little odd to sue McAfee because he didn't start these rumors or even insinuate on the show that they were true. He was merely talking about what everybody on social media was also talking about. So,
he's doing it from the biggest sports station in the country and a national show. I do think that he was not careful enough in going in on this story. Like it was a mistake, obviously, if it wasn't true.
I agree. No, I don't disagree. But look, what happened is obviously horrible. I don't even know if I even necessarily believe this story. It all started on, I read about this a little bit, since within the past week or so. Right. And it started on Yik Yak. I didn't know Yik Yak was still a thing. I thought that died out. I thought that died out 10 years ago.
It was like Yik Yak and Total Frat Move, which are two, if they built a time capsule of 2015, those would be both be in there. Which I didn't know were even existed. Yeah, so it was an odd thing. But yeah, I did think he needed to be more careful. But I mean, Pat McAfee's show is always pretty much out there. There's a lot of controversy what people say. Obviously, there was talk of Jimmy Kimmel suing them for the Aaron Rodgers stuff. Yeah, I think that he probably should have been more careful. But I mean, his show is always in the headlines, which I think that, while a lot of people are not fans of him, I think that ESPN should subscribe to the theory that all publicity is good publicity, which I think goes with Pat McAfee's show. I wanted to mention something about Pat McAfee's show. So tonight, when this show airs, Pat McAfee is having a live show called The Big Night Out, which is going to be a live show at a theater. Where is Pat McAfee from?
I don't know where he's from.
That would be Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Now, there's a football team that plays in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and they are possibly going to sign somebody that is a friend of Pat McAfee. So it would make a lot of sense, as the internet is saying, that this person would announce his signing during the show tomorrow.
Interesting. And that is something that would happen because Aaron Rodgers probably tells all his deepest and darkest secrets to Pat McAfee.
Well, and then also it is a lot of people were saying online, it is kind of if he did that, it would kind of be a fuck you to, legacy. ESPN is the definition of legacy media, but the mainstream media. Pat McAfee, I still don't consider the mainstream media.
No, not even close to mainstream sports media, even though he's with ESPN. All of the mainstream quote unquote sports journalists hate Pat McAfee. Right. Because just and they, by the way, they also hate Aaron Rodgers even more than they hate Pat McAfee.
Exactly. Which, by the way, one of the biggest I don't know how to say it, biggest this was going to be so cool if it happened, but now it was the biggest failure joke was when he appeared on Pat McAfee and then Devontae Adams came into the camera. That would have been the start of the championship DVD, but instead it was just the biggest nothing. It turned out to be nothing.
Yeah,
and neither guy is with the Jets now. So.
Yeah, well, obviously,
but Rodgers is definitely Rodgers is definitely somebody who will do that. I mean, Rodgers is. I do think that as much as he goes into like these darkness retreats and stuff. Like Rodgers is a guy that I don't think can exist for a portion of time without his name being in the headlines. As much as he hates the media, like he always needs his name in the headlines. Even like with like the immunized thing up until now, and it's something that I think he definitely thrives off of, and he's definitely, I think, since the immunized thing, I don't know if there was anything before then, but he's certainly been in sort of a war with the media. But some of it is also self-created.
Some of it is self-created, and some of it is also just stupid and created by the media. It goes both ways. Like it would be one thing if he did everything right, and then the media just went after him for no reason, or for silly reasons, like kind of in the beginning with the whole vaccine thing. But then also saying Jimmy Kimmel's suggesting that Jimmy Kimmel's a pedophile on McAfee is a really stupid thing, because as much as I'm not a fan of Jimmy Kimmel, really, but I mean, it's kind of absurd to claim he was on Epstein's island.
Right. Well, but then he also like come back the next week and was like, well, I didn't actually say it. I just said this. Why did they blow it out of proportion? It was like, well, you knew when you said it that it was going to get blown out of proportion. Like,
also, that's what it's doing. It suggests him saying that, like, it's really hard. It would take a lot of mental gymnastics to really try and justify that him saying he's not actually a pedophile. Like, obviously, that's obviously what his suggestion was.
And I'm a Rodgers fan, but he's definitely a guy that clearly thinks that he is, the smartest person in the room, in every room he's in. Like, he's definitely one of those guys.
I think a lot of that is just a product of him being a professional athlete.
Right.
And being a celebrity and being one of the greatest to ever do it. I think that the reason athletes have egos is in a sense that they've earned it. But it also makes them think they're smarter than they really are.
Yeah. And there was, something that started the Jets. We talked about earlier, players running the season. I mean, if you look at last season, like you have 2 days in the whole off season where you like have to go to mini camp, and instead, like he was, allowed to go to Egypt. And like, first of all, you couldn't have gone any other time, like when there's these 2 days, but also like, then it just turned into, Salah saying it wasn't excused and then turning into something else. Like that just started a lot of the Jets' problems last year. And I feel like he is also a guy, like, I feel like Rodgers is also a guy where it would be like, he would love Robert Salah. And then like, if Salah says like, oh, you can't go to Egypt, like it would completely turn like, oh, now this guy has to get fired.
Yeah,
well, that kind of guy.
What Salah should have just done in that situation was just say it was excused, because it effectively kind of was. Like, it wasn't excused technically because he ended up getting fined for it, but the team really was just kind of okay with it.
Which was a mistake on his part. And if you look at kind of a domino effect also of what happened was they fired Robert Salah and put Ulbrich as head coach. Ulbrich was not a good head coach. And what it also did was it took away their defensive coordinator. I mean, their defense and specifically, especially Sauce Gardner, took a giant step back from the year before.
Yeah.
And that was kind of a domino effect of firing Salah at 2-3. They only won, 2 more games after that. So that was a domino effect. But again, so was, bring in Lazard, bring in those guys, like bring in my friends, Devontae Adams. I mean, I was not against them bringing Devontae Adams. It was a little bit late. I thought they should have brought Devontae Adams the year before. And they brought in Devontae Adams at a time when they were just flailing. But yeah, I mean, they took a step back. And if you look at where they are now, I mean, they're in an odd position. They have a quarterback who's not really a great NFL starter. They don't have a good enough pick to draft a quarterback. They're in an odd position. I think I think the Jets are going to be not a good team next year. I don't know if you would agree with that. I think they're going to be bad.
I agree. I don't think they're going to be a good team. I think that first of all, they're in the same division as the Bills and the Dolphins. I think there's a really good chance they're going to be worse than the Patriots. I mean, like Drake May,
good. Yeah.
Like Drake May looks like he's good. And it's going to be his second season.
Yeah, and the Jets. I mean, where I would be worried is if Sauce has the season he had this season, last season, then I'd be really worried.
Well, the thing with Sauce, I don't disagree that Sauce Gardner is very overrated. He's not good enough for a nickname like that. But I also think people overlook. I think people were very hyper focused on Sauce Gardner. I think a huge part of it was that the defense overall was not good, and the Jets' pass rush was terrible, and they weren't getting to the quarterback. And if any defense that does not get to the quarterback, the secondary always suffers because the secondary corners can only cover wide receivers for like a few seconds.
Yeah, but I like the hiring. I mean, I like the hiring. A lot of people have to realize, like last year, what happened to the Lions? Obviously, they were just awful in that game against Washington. But with Aaron Glenn, I would not blame for anything that happened with the Lions. The amount of sheer injuries they had on that defense was unfathomable. And I think that it was a great hiring. By the way, I shout out to, I think it was CBS Sports, who gave the Bears an A grade for hiring Ben Johnson and the Jets a D grade for hiring Aaron Glenn. That makes sense.
Yeah.
I think that Rodgers is just a guy that he has to be in the news. Like we said, it was a gift to the New York sports media. It was a gift to radio talk shows. Yeah. Even though New York is like the one place where like radio talk shows actually kind of thrive, are not bad in the summer because it's a baseball heavy town. But he was a gift, but he was a detriment to the Jets, and he certainly not that the Jets were in a great position, but he certainly has taken them down a peg.
Yeah, no, that is very true about sports talk shows in New York, like BT and Sal. They were breaking down April and May baseball games. I'm like, my God.
Yeah, people overreact. I mean, there's a lot of if people aren't in this area, they wouldn't. But like Yankee and Met fans, like there's like 162 baseball seasons. Like every game is an overreact. Like when the Yankees were hitting the home runs, they were the greatest team ever, and then the next day they strike out 13 games, they're the worst team ever. So there's a lot of that media, and I think you were the one that told me this, that New York sports radio actually does better ratings wise when the teams lose.
Well, yeah, that makes perfect sense. Well, if you look at political networks, their ratings do better when the other guy is in office. Like it's the same type of thing.
At least for MSNBC, but still.
Yeah. Like so. No, that's definitely true about, because New Yorkers they're just angry people, I guess. I don't know. In the Northeast, it's not just New York. It's like that in Boston. It's like that in Philly.
Yeah.
Sure. I mean, I'm not saying sports radio ratings. I don't know, but I think there's a good chance that WEEI's ratings are better when the Boston.
Well, the sports hubs ratings. WEEI couldn't get a.
Well, not anymore. EEI is terrible now. Ever since they got rid of Kirk and Jerry.
Right. But yeah, these guys, he is a gift to the media. He's a gift to ESPN. But at the same time, he's not. And he had a good year last year. Like he had a year, especially compared to Jet quarterbacks. And the Jets have just not been a franchise that have had great quarterbacks.
But I think that a lot of people in the media just wanted Aaron Rodgers to have a bad year, and we're going to be hyper focused on how bad he was rather than anything positive.
The one thing that he did do was, which he would have done for the Giants as well, even though the Giants are a little bit more in a different area than the Jets, but is he made the Jets way more relevant nationally than they ever were. I mean, and the fact, like, I don't think that, like, the fact that the Jets are in New York was helpful also to a lot of that magnification. But even the months like before he went to the Jets, it was all that people were talking about on the radio.
Yeah, that is also true. Briefly, I want to talk about Alex Ovechkin. He breaks Wayne Gretzky's goal record. You care about this a little more than I do, although it's still very significant in the sports world. Alex Ovechkin is actually 39. He's pretty old. I didn't realize he was so old.
I mean, I don't really care about that much. And basically the Rangers are going to miss the playoffs, which means I don't have to watch any hockey this spring. I could focus on the Knicks getting swept in the second round. But it's good. I mean, the one thing is, like, he broke the record. It was unbelievable. He broke his leg this year and still ended up breaking the record this year. Two things real quick. One, the record was 894. Wayne Gretzky couldn't have come back another season and gotten 6 goals to get to 900. But the second thing is Wayne Gretzky, if you took away his goals, all of his goals, he would still be the all-time leading NHL points getter because of all the assists he had. So still the GOAT. But yeah, it was crazy, and it was done. It was done at the Islanders. The tickets were like $1,000 before this game started, which is insane because you don't even know if he's going to score. But yeah, it was amazing, and he's I mean, he's been basically our whole lives been like this is like 20 years. He's basically been a star in the NHL. So yeah, congratulations to him, and yeah, we'll see. I believe they have the best record in the Eastern Conference too, so he could take a cup this year too. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, Alex Ovechkin's been like the face of the NHL my entire life. I haven't watched much hockey throughout my life, but I am very much aware of Alex Ovechkin. All right, so that's our show this week. This is Moving the Goalpost. You can follow us across social media at MTGPETV. Follow me on Twitter at Nick DMart. You can follow Liam at Liam MTGP. That's the show for this week. I'll be back next week. See ya.